The snow had just started when the black sedan pulled up outside Seoul Station. The Mafia boss, Kang Han-Seol, stepped out flanked by his guards, but before he could take another step, he felt something collide with his legs. "Daddy, Daddy, you came back." He looked down. A little girl in a pink winter coat clung to him, her face streaked with tears, her small hands gripping his suit jacket like it was the only thing keeping her from drowning. Hanseol's guards moved forward, hands reaching for holsters, but he raised one finger. "Stop." The girl looked up at him with eyes that held something he hadn't seen directed at him in years. Absolute trust. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered, voice breaking. "Mommy said you were lost, but I knew. I waited every day." Hanseol felt something crack in his chest. People ran from him. Children crossed the street when they saw his face, and yet this child looked at him like he was salvation itself. She pulled a crumpled flyer from her backpack with shaking hands, a missing person poster. The man in the photo could have been him 10 years ago, before the scars, before the weight of bodies added shadows to his eyes. He should have walked away. He should have told her the truth, that he was the kind of man her real father would have hidden her from. But when he opened his mouth, what came out instead was, "Yeah, I'm back." The girl's name was Lily. She told him this while holding his hand so tightly it almost hurt, chattering through her tears as if afraid that silence would make him disappear again. Hanseol let his guards trail behind at a distance, their confusion palpable but unspoken. No one questioned Kang Han-Seol, not even when he was doing something inexplicable. "Mommy cries at night," Lily said, swinging their joined hands. "She tries to be quiet, but I hear her. She keeps your picture by her bed and talks to it sometimes." Hanseol's jaw tightened. He glanced down at the missing person flyer still clutched in the girl's other hand. The face staring back at him could have been his own reflection from another life. Same sharp jawline, same deep-set eyes, even the same slight scar above the left eyebrow that he'd gotten from a bottle fight when he was 19. The only difference was the smile. The man in the photo smiled like someone who still believed the world was good. "How long has he been gone?" Hanseol heard himself ask. 3 years, 2 months, and Lily's small face scrunched up in concentration. 16 days. Mommy marks it on the calendar. 3 years. Long enough for hope to rot into despair. Long enough for a child to forget a voice but remember a face. Long enough for Hanseol to convince himself that one more lie wouldn't matter in the pile of sins he'd already accumulated. They walked through the narrow streets of Seongbuk-dong, the snow falling heavier now, muffling the city sounds. Lily led him to a small house wedged between larger buildings, its paint peeling, its gate rusted. Even from outside, Hanseol could see the signs, the darkened windows to save electricity, the garden that had gone to weeds, the foreclosure notice partially hidden under accumulated mail. "We're home," Lily called out, pushing through the gate. A woman appeared in the doorway, and Hanseol saw the exact moment her world stopped. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe early 30s, wearing a faded apron over clothes that had been washed too many times. Her hand flew to her mouth, and she staggered backward as if she'd seen a ghost. "Yi Min," the name came out broken, disbelieving. Hanseol stood there in the falling snow, aware of his guards watching from the street corner, aware of the phone in his pocket buzzing with messages about shipments and territory disputes, aware that he should walk away right now before this went any further. But Lily was already pulling him forward, and the woman, Naomi, was stumbling down the steps, tears streaming down her face, reaching for him with trembling hands. "It's really you," she whispered. "They said you were dead, they said," her voice broke entirely. Hanseol caught her before she collapsed, and felt the sharp angles of her shoulders, the weight she'd lost, the way she shook like something that had been holding itself together for too long and finally had permission to break. Over her head he met the eyes of his head of security. The man's expression was carefully neutral, but the question was clear. "What are you doing?" Han-Seol didn't have an answer. He just tightened his arms around a woman who thought he was someone worth coming home to, and chose not to let go. Naomi wouldn't stop touching his face. Her hands trembled as they traced his jaw, his cheekbones, the scar above his eyebrow, as if confirming he was solid and real. Han-Seol stood rigid in the small entryway, uncertain how to respond to tenderness he didn't deserve. "I don't understand," Naomi whispered. "Where were you? Why didn't you call?" The name Yimin felt like a blade between his ribs. Han-Seol opened his mouth, but the lie lodged in his throat. He'd killed men without hesitation, but he couldn't force out the words that would make this deception complete. "It's complicated," he finally managed. "I need to sit down." She led him to a kitchen that might have been cheerful once. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator, but it was what Han-Seol didn't see that made his chest tighten. No dishes in the sink because there was nothing to wash. No food smells. No clutter of plenty. Naomi opened the refrigerator and Han-Seol caught a glimpse before she quickly closed it. Half a carton of milk, wilted vegetables, nearly empty rice. She moved to the cupboard instead, pulling down a tea box, maybe 3 bags left. "When did you last eat?" Han-Seol asked quietly. Naomi's hand stilled. "I had breakfast." "When did you last eat?" he repeated, his voice carrying command. Her shoulders sagged. "Lily needs to eat, she's growing. I can skip meals, she can't." Han-Seol looked around with new eyes. Bills stacked on the counter, stamped with red warnings. A cracked window patched with tape, sealing spots where water had leaked. This wasn't just poverty, this was drowning in slow motion. "The debt collectors came last week," Naomi said, still facing the cupboard. "They said you owed them money, gambling debts. I told them I didn't have anything, but they said they'd take the house. 30 days. Her voice cracked. "It's been 23. Han-Seol felt ice spread through his veins. Debt collectors. In his city, there were only 2 operations that handled gambling collections, and he had contracts with both, which meant his own people were grinding this family into dust. "Daddy, look!" Lily burst in, clutching drawings, her face bright with joy. "I drew this one last week. It's you coming home." The picture showed 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a smiling sun. The father wore a crown of flowers. Han-Seol took the drawing with hands that had signed death warrants and felt something break open inside him. He looked at Naomi's hollow cheeks, at Lily's too thin wrists, at the empty kitchen that should have been full of life. "The debt," he said, his voice cold and final. "It's gone as of now." Naomi stared. "What?" "And you're going to eat tonight, a real meal." He pulled out his phone. "All of you." Han-Seol stepped outside while Naomi put Lily to bed, the cold air biting at his face. His head of security, Min-Yi, waited by the gate, expression carefully blank. "I need groceries delivered here within the hour," Han-Seol said quietly. "Everything. Fill the refrigerator, the cupboards, the pantry. Make it look like a month's worth of shopping, not a charity case." Min-Yi's eyebrow twitched, the closest thing to surprise Han-Seol had seen from him in years. "Sir." "And toys, age-appropriate for a 7-year-old girl. Nothing extravagant, used is fine. Dolls, books, art supplies. Things a father would have brought home over 3 years." Han-Seol lit a cigarette, his hand steady despite the chaos in his chest. "Route it through the convenience store 2 blocks down. Make it look like I carried it myself." "Should I ask what's happening?" "No." Han-Seol exhaled smoke into the snowy air. "And Min-Yi, find out which collection agency is holding debt under the name Park Yi-min. I want the file on my desk by morning." Min-Yi nodded and disappeared into the shadows. Han-Seol stood there another moment, watching the warm light from Lily's bedroom window. He could see Naomi's silhouette moving inside, tucking blankets, smoothing hair. The ordinary intimacy of it felt like watching something through glass, beautiful but untouchable. His phone buzzed, a message from his underboss about the shipment coming through Busan. Han-Seol ignored it. 40 minutes later, a unmarked van pulled up. Two of his men, dressed in civilian clothes, faces he'd specifically chosen because they looked forgettable, began unloading boxes. Han-Seol intercepted them at the gate. "Leave them here. I'll take them in myself." They worked in efficient silence, stacking bags of rice, fresh vegetables, meat, milk, eggs, boxes of cereal with cartoon characters on them, instant noodles, the expensive kind with real broth packets, fruit that wasn't bruised, bread that was still warm. By the time they finished, there were enough supplies to feed a family for weeks. Han-Seol carried them in 3 trips, his expensive suit jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up. Naomi found him on the 2nd trip, her eyes widening at the bags covering the kitchen counter. "Yimin, how did you?" "Back pay," Han-Seol said, the lie coming easier now. "From the company, they owed me 3 years of wages I collected today." He set down another bag, not meeting her eyes. "There's more, toys too, for Lily." Naomi's hand covered her mouth. She moved to the counter, touching the food like it might vanish. Fresh apples, real butter, a whole chicken. Her shoulders began to shake. "Hey," Han-Seol said awkwardly, but she turned and pressed her face against his chest, crying in great, gulping sobs that sounded like they'd been held back for years. He stood there, arms hanging useless at his sides, until finally he wrapped them around her and let her break. "Thank you," she whispered against his shirt. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Over her head, through the window, Han-Seol saw Minyi give a subtle nod from the street. The delivery was complete. The lie was built. And somewhere in this city, someone was about to learn what happened when they threatened Kang Han-Seol's family. Even if that family didn't know who he really was. Han-Seol was helping Lily with breakfast when the knock came. Not the polite knock of neighbors, the heavy, deliberate pounding that said, "We don't care if you're home or not, we're coming in." Naomi's spoon clattered against her bowl, all color drained from her face. "Stay here," Han-Seol said quietly. Through the window he'd already counted them, 3 men, cheap suits, cheaper attitudes. The leader wore a leather jacket with a snake embroidered on the back. Black Snake Gang. He knew their boss. "Daddy, who is it?" Lily asked. "Just some people I need to talk to, sweetheart. Keep eating your eggs." He stepped outside, closing the door firmly. The 3 men looked him up and down, his expensive watch, tailored clothes, the way he carried himself. The leader, a scarred man with yellow teeth, smiled. "Park Yimin, back from the dead." He lit a cigarette slowly. "You owe us money, a lot of money." "The debt is paid," Han-Seol said flatly. Yellow Teeth laughed. "You disappeared for 3 years. Interest accumulated. You're into us for 30 million won now." He glanced at the house. "Nice family you got, be a shame if." Han-Seol moved before the threat finished. His hand shot out, gripping the man's throat, slamming him against the fence hard enough to crack wood. The other 2 reached for weapons but froze when they saw his eyes. "Backyard now, unless you want the neighbors to see this." He released the leader, who stumbled back coughing. Something in Han-Seol's voice made all 3 comply, moving to the overgrown garden behind the house. Han-Seol followed, rolling his shoulders. The moment they were hidden, he dropped the mask entirely. "Do you know who I am?" Yellow Teeth rubbed his throat, anger and confusion on his face. "You're some dead gambler who—" "I'm Kang Han-Seol." He let the name sink in, watched recognition dawn, then terror. "And you just threatened my family." The 3 men went white. One stumbled backward into a rusted bicycle. "Sir, we didn't. We had no idea." "The debt doesn't exist. It never existed. Park Yimin's file is erased." Han-Seol stepped closer, voice never rising. "If anyone from Black Snake comes within a kilometer of this house again, I will personally visit your boss and remind him what happens when people forget their place. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir, completely. We'll tell him." "No, you'll tell him I'll be visiting tonight to discuss his organization's restructuring." They fled, practically falling over each other to reach the gate. Han-Seol stood in the backyard, letting his heartbeat slow, forcing his face back into something human. When he turned, Lily stood in the doorway holding her stuffed rabbit. "Daddy, are you okay?" He walked over, crouched to her level. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just taking out the trash." She giggled, throwing her arms around his neck. "Mommy says you always were good at that." Han-Seol held her, breathing in strawberry shampoo, and thought about how many bodies he'd have to bury to keep this moment safe. The invitation came on purple construction paper, decorated with glitter glue and stickers of smiling stars. Lily presented it to Han-Seol during dinner, her eyes bright with hope that made his chest ache. "It's next Friday at 2 o'clock, she said, bouncing in her seat. "I'm playing a flower in the spring show. Miss Kim says I have the most important part because flowers are what make spring beautiful." She pushed the paper across the table. "Will you come, Daddy? Please." Han-Seol stared at the childish handwriting, the crooked letters spelling out "You're invited." His phone buzzed in his pocket, the third time in 10 minutes. He knew what it was. The Busan deal. 6 months of negotiations with the Yakuza coming to a head. Friday at 2 o'clock, a warehouse by the port, enough product to set him up for the next 5 years. "Yi-min," Naomi's voice was soft. "You'll be there, won't you?" He looked up at two faces watching him with identical expressions of careful hope, the kind that expected disappointment but desperately wanted to be wrong. How many times had the real Yi-min made promises he couldn't keep? How many school plays had he missed? "I'll be there," Han-Seol heard himself say. Lily screamed with joy, launching herself at him so hard she nearly knocked over his water glass. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and she planted a sticky kiss on his cheek. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to be the best flower ever." After Lily went to bed, Han-Seol stepped outside to make the call he'd been dreading. His underboss answered on the first ring. "The Busan meet is confirmed for Friday," Park said. 2 o'clock sharp. "Tanaka doesn't do delays if you're not there." "Reschedule it." Silence. Then, "Boss, this deal has taken 6 months. Tanaka flies back to Osaka Saturday morning. There is no reschedule." "Then we don't do the deal." "That's 15 billion won walking away." 15 billion? For what? Park's voice rose with disbelief. What could possibly be more important? Han-Seol looked through the kitchen window where Naomi was washing dishes, humming something soft and tuneless. The purple invitation sat on the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a strawberry. "A flower," he said quietly. "A what?" "Handle Tanaka. Offer him 20% more. If he won't take it, let him walk." Han-Seol's voice hardened into command. "I have somewhere else to be Friday afternoon." He ended the call before Park could argue further. His phone immediately lit up with messages, angry, confused, urgent. Han-Seol silenced it and went back inside. Naomi turned from the sink, drying her hands. "Everything okay?" "Perfect." He picked up the invitation, studying Lily's careful artwork. A stick figure in a flower costume, petals spread wide, a smile drawn so large it nearly split the face in two. "I just cleared my schedule." She smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her, the kind that reached her eyes and made her look 10 years younger. "She's going to be so happy. She talks about you constantly at school. Her teachers say it's all she can talk about, that her daddy came home." The word daddy still felt like a foreign object in his mouth, but it was getting easier to swallow. Han-Seol placed the invitation back on the refrigerator, centering it carefully among the other drawings. Somewhere in Busan, a deal worth billions was falling apart, and for the first time in his life, Kang Han-Seol didn't care. The file arrived at midnight, dropped on Han-Seol's desk by Min-Yi with unusual hesitance. Han-Seol had been nursing whiskey in his penthouse office, the city lights of Seoul spread beneath him like scattered diamonds. He'd left Naomi's house hours ago, promising to return for breakfast. "You're not going to like this," Min-yi said. Han-Seol opened the folder. Park Yi-min's life spilled out in documents and photographs. A construction worker, decent salary. No criminal record until 3 years ago when he'd gotten involved in underground gambling. Lost big, borrowed bigger. The debt had spiraled from 5 million won to 30 in less than 6 months. Standard story. Han-Seol had seen 1,000 like it. Then he reached the final page, and his blood turned to ice. The collection order had been signed by Kim D-young, one of his own sector bosses. The enforcement team, his people. The location where Yi-min was last seen, a warehouse Han-Seol himself owned in Incheon, and stamped across the bottom in red ink, permanent resolution authorized. When, Han-Seol's voice came out deadly quiet. 3 years ago, February 14th, Min-yi shifted uncomfortably. Valentine's Day. Kim said the guy refused to pay, made threats about going to the police, so they... Where's the body? Incheon Harbor, weighted down, standard disposal. Han-Seol stared at the photograph of Yi-min clipped to the file. The man smiled back at him, arm around Naomi, Lily barely 4 years old perched on his shoulders. They'd been at an amusement park. Lily was eating cotton candy. They looked happy. His own people had done this, on his authorization system, under his infrastructure. The same infrastructure that was supposed to make him rich had ground this family into dust. Kim knew about the family, Han-Seol asked. Min-yi nodded grimly. The harassment was intentional. He figured the widow would sell the house to cover the debt, then they'd pocket the difference. The house is in a developing area, worth triple what Yi-min owed. Kim's been waiting for the foreclosure to go through so he can buy it cheap through a shell company. Han-Seol's hand tightened on his glass until he felt it crack. He set it down carefully before it shattered. For 3 years, while Lily waited at train stations and Naomi cried herself to sleep, Kim D-young had been orchestrating their destruction for profit. For a house. Where is Kim now? His usual place, the poker room in Gangnam. Han-Seol stood, buttoning his jacket with mechanical precision. His reflection in the window showed a man who looked exactly like someone's dead husband, someone's missing father. The resemblance that had started as bizarre coincidence now felt like something else, like fate had handed him a chance at redemption he didn't deserve. "Call a meeting," Han-Seol said, "every sector boss, tomorrow night." He turned to face Min-yi and his expression made the veteran enforcer step back. "And bring Kim to me personally. Tonight, I don't care what he's doing." "Boss." "He killed Lily's father." The words came out flat, factual, damning. "He's been terrorizing them for years for real estate profit." Han-Seol's voice dropped to something sub-zero. "On my infrastructure, using my name." Min-yi's eyes widened slightly. In all their years together, he'd never heard Han-Seol claim anyone as family. "What are you going to do?" Han-Seol looked back at the file, at the photograph of a man who died begging for mercy so he could return to his daughter's 4th birthday party. A man whose face Han-Seol now wore, whose life he'd stepped into, whose family he'd promised to protect. "I'm going to show Kim what happens when you take a father away from his little girl," Han-Seol said quietly. "And then I'm going to make sure no one in my organization ever forgets it." The park was crowded for a Saturday afternoon. Han-Seol pushed Lily on the swings, her delighted shrieks cutting through the autumn air. Naomi sat on a nearby bench, actually smiling at her phone, probably at the job offer she'd received that morning from a company Han-Seol secretly owned. "Higher, Daddy, higher." Han-Seol pushed harder, watching her soar upward, pink jacket bright against the gray sky. For 3 weeks, he'd been living this double life, family breakfasts and midnight executions, school plays and territory negotiations. Kim D-young had disappeared 2 weeks ago. No one asked questions. "Kang Sajangnam." The voice froze Han-Seol mid-push. He turned slowly. Lieutenant Choi stood 10 meters away, arms crossed, expression carefully neutral. Behind him, two junior enforcers tried very hard not to stare. Lily dragged her feet, slowing the swing. "Daddy, who's that man?" "An old friend, sweetheart. Keep swinging. I'll be right back." Han-Seol walked toward Choi, positioning himself so Lily couldn't see his face. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you're here." "You missed the chairman's dinner last night," Choi said quietly. "You haven't returned calls in 3 days. The Busan deal fell apart. People are talking." His eyes flicked toward Naomi, then Lily. "They're saying you've gone soft, that you're playing house with some dead man's family." "Careful." "I am being careful, the chairman is." Choi pulled out his phone, showed Han-Seol a message. "He wants to see you, tonight. And he's asking questions about Park Yi-min's file, about why his widow suddenly has money, why Kim De-young vanished." Han-Seol's jaw tightened. The chairman, old, paranoid, vicious. A man who'd killed his own brother for showing mercy to an enemy. If he learned about this deception, about Han-Seol's attachment to this family, he wouldn't just end it. He'd make it a lesson. "Tell him I'll be there." "That's not enough." Choi stepped closer, voice dropping. "You need to end this, whatever this is. The organization comes first. Always. That's the oath you took." "I remember my oaths." "Do you? Because from where I'm standing, you're choosing them over us." Choi glanced at Lily again. "She's cute. Reminds me of my niece. But she's not yours, boss. And pretending she is will get all of you killed." Han-Seol grabbed Choi's collar, yanked him close. "If you ever threaten them." "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm trying to save your life." Choi's voice was urgent, almost pleading. "The chairman thinks you're compromised. He's already ordered surveillance on this house. By Monday, he'll know everything, and then he'll eliminate the problem." He met Han-Seol's eyes. "All of the problem." Han-Seol released him, mind racing. The chairman wouldn't hesitate. Naomi, Lily, they'd be leverage first, then liabilities. Standard protocol for handling compromised assets. "Daddy," Lily called out, "watch me jump." He turned just in time to see her leap from the swing, landing with a stumble that made Naomi gasp. But Lily popped up laughing, arms spread wide. "Did you see? I flew." Han-Seol felt something crack inside his chest. For 3 weeks, he'd been pretending this could last. That he could keep both worlds separate. That no one would notice the notorious Kang Han-Seol acting like someone's father. "What are you going to do?" Choi asked quietly. Han-Seol watched Lily run to Naomi, chattering about her jump. Watched Naomi smooth her daughter's hair with the casual tenderness of someone who'd never had to kill to survive. This life, this fragile, bright, impossible life, was already over. The only question was how many people died when it ended. "I'm going to see the chairman," Han-Seol said finally, "and I'm going to make a choice." Choi studied him. "Which choice?" Han-Seol didn't answer. He walked back to the bench where his borrowed family waited, and for the first time since this began, he let himself imagine what it would cost to make them real. The meeting room smelled of cigarette smoke and fear. Han-Seol had chosen neutral ground, an abandoned restaurant in Itaewon that belonged to no one. 6 gang leaders sat around the table, representatives from every debt collection operation in Seoul. The Black Snake boss, Kwon, sat directly across from him, trying to look confident and failing. "Thank you for coming," Han-Seol said, pouring himself tea with steady hands. "I know it was short notice." "You said this was about territory restructuring," Kwon said. "I lied." Han-Seol set down the teapot. "This is about debt forgiveness." Uncomfortable laughter rippled around the table. The Yellow Crane boss leaned back. "Debt forgiveness. Since when do you care about?" "Every family on this list." Han-Seol slid a folder across the table. It landed with a heavy thud. "These debts are erased, effective immediately. Any collector who approaches these addresses answers to me personally." Kwon opened the folder, his face darkening. "This is thousands of accounts, millions in collections. You can't just... I can, I am. Han-Seol's voice was cold steel. These are families with children, single mothers, widows, people who borrowed to survive, not gamble. We're not in the business of destroying families anymore. The hell we're not, Kwon slammed the table. That's exactly our business. You taught us aggressive collection, and now you want to play saint. Han-Seol stood slowly. Min-yi and 4 enforcers materialized from shadows, positioning themselves behind each leader. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. 3 weeks ago, your men threatened a 7-year-old girl, Han-Seol said quietly. Told her mother they'd take her house, made her skip meals to pay interest on a dead man's debt. He walked around the table. That ends today. Or what? Kwon tried to sound defiant. You'll start a war over some random family. Not random. Han-Seol stopped behind Kwon's chair. My family. The revelation hung in the air like a blade. Several leaders exchanged glances, recalculating. Kwon's face went pale. The girl at the station, someone whispered. Her name is Lily. Han-Seol placed both hands on Kwon's shoulders, felt him stiffen. And if I ever hear her name from your lips again, I'll personally remove your tongue. He squeezed hard enough to make Kwon gasp. Are we clear? Terrified nods around the table. Here, what happens next? Han-Seol returned to his seat. You restructure, maximum interest at legal limits, no collections at schools, no threats against children, no targeting widows for real estate. He slid a document forward. These are the new rules. Sign them or find a new city. Min-yi stepped forward, dropped 6 photographs on the table, each leader's home address, family photos, children's schools. Then I show you exactly what it feels like, Han-Seol said softly, to have someone threaten your family. One by one they signed. Kwon was last, his signature an angry scrawl. This is a mistake, Kwon muttered. The chairman won't. The chairman will hear about this from me. Tonight. Han-Seol smiled without warmth. Along with documentation of every illegal operation you've been running without giving him his cut. Kwon's face went gray. Han-Seol stood, buttoning his jacket. Meeting adjourned. The families on that list are untouchable. He walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Kwon, stay away from Seongbuk-dong. Forever. Outside, Min-yi fell into step beside him. The chairman won't like this. I know. Han-Seol checked his watch. 6:30. He promised Lily he'd be home for dinner. But some things are worth the risk. The chairman's office overlooked the Han River, all glass and steel and cold authority. Han-Seol had been summoned at dawn, which meant the old man had been awake all night planning this confrontation. He sat across the massive desk, waiting. You've been busy, Chairman Go said finally, not looking up from the document spread before him. Restructuring debt operations, forgiving millions in collections, executing one of your own sector bosses. He raised his eyes, cold as winter, playing father to a dead man's family. Yes, sir. That's all you have to say. Yes, sir. The chairman's voice remained eerily calm. I built this organization on fear and efficiency. You were my best enforcer because you understood that. No mercy, no weakness. And now you're signing adoption papers. Han-Seol didn't flinch. The papers sat in his jacket pocket unsigned. He'd spent the entire night staring at them, at the line where he'd write his real name, not Yi Min's but his own, making it official, making it true. The girl thinks you're her father, the chairman continued. An amusing coincidence, but you've let it become a liability. Choi says you chose a school play over a 15 billion won deal. I did. Why? The question cracked like a whip. Han-Seol met the old man's eyes. Because for the first time in 20 years, someone looked at me and saw something worth loving, not fearing, not using, loving. He leaned forward. And I realized that's worth more than any deal we could ever make. The chairman was quiet for a long moment. You've gone soft. No, I've remembered what it means to be human. Han-Seol pulled out the adoption papers, set them on the desk. I'm keeping the family, I'm keeping the new collection protocols, and I'm keeping my position. He paused. Unless you plan to stop me. You're willing to go to war over this, over a woman and child who aren't even yours. They are mine. The words came out with absolute certainty, not by blood, by choice, by protection. By every morning I make her breakfast and every night I check under her bed for monsters. By every debt I've erased and every threat I've eliminated. Han-Seol's voice hardened. I've earned that title more than most biological fathers ever will. The chairman studied him, expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, he laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You remind me of my son, before I had him killed for similar sentiments. He stood, walked to the window. But you're more valuable than he was, and perhaps the organization has been built on fear long enough. Han-Seol said nothing, waiting. Keep your family, keep your protocols. The chairman turned. But understand this, the moment they make you weak, the moment they compromise an operation, I will remove them, not as punishment, as necessity. They won't. They already have. You've chosen them over profit, over protocol, over everything I taught you. The old man's smile was thin. But you've also dismantled our biggest competitor, restructured our operations to avoid police attention, and reminded every gang in Seoul why they fear the Kang name. So perhaps this weakness is also a strength. Han-Seol stood, picking up the papers. Then we're done here. One more thing. The chairman's voice stopped him at the door. What will you tell them about who you really are? The truth, eventually. Han-Seol looked back. That I'm not the man who left them, but I'm trying to be the man who came back. That evening, Han-Seol sat at Naomi's kitchen table with the adoption papers spread between them. Lily was asleep upstairs, exhausted from her school play, which he'd attended, front row, clapping until his hands hurt. You don't have to do this, Naomi said softly. You've already done so much. I want to. Han-Seol picked up the pen, then hesitated. But you should know I'm not Yi Min. She looked up, surprised. I mean, he struggled for words. I'm not the man who left. I can't be him. I can only be this. Someone who protects you, provides for you, loves Lily like she's mine. He met her eyes. Is that enough? Naomi reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. It's everything. Han-Seol signed his real name, Kang Han-Seol, in clear, bold strokes. Not a lie, not a replacement. Just a man choosing to be a father because a little girl at a train station had seen something in him worth saving. Upstairs, Lily stirred in her sleep, murmuring "Daddy" into her pillow. And for the first time in his life, the word felt like it belonged to him.